My dad was a maker. It's weird. It's something I didn't realize until just a few years ago. When I say maker, I'm not trying to define that term. He wasn't a tradesman. He ran ticket offices for airlines, the government, the military. I guess you would call him sort of a very high-level travel agent. He also wasn't a craftsman, although that's not exactly fair. I don't think he would have thought of himself as an expert in anything, more of a perpetual student in a lot of things. It surprises me that I never thought of him as a maker, but one of my strongest memories as a child is my dad coming home from work and working on his hobbies. He'd sit at one end of the dining room table and he'd lay out the tools for whatever he was working on and make something. And that's sort of how I looked at what Dad did as hobbies. And he had a whole bunch of hobbies. There was always woodworking. Woodworking seemed to be one of those ever-present hobbies. My dad even built a plywood boat in our garage. I don't remember it, but my oldest brother says it's one of his earliest memories. And the story is that he took my grandfather, his father-in-law, out fishing in that boat, and they caught a shark. And my grandfather wanted to shoot that shark before they brought it in the boat. My dad wouldn't let him. So my dad pulled that shark in the boat and tried to hit it with an oar. He missed, and he put a hole in the bottom of the boat. And now the shark started swimming around the bottom of the boat. My grandfather took his gun out and he shot that shark. Now, I don't remember that boat at all, but I do have pictures of that shark. And I do remember that 25 horsepower motor sitting in a barrel in our garage for most of my childhood. It was a lot more than woodworking, though. At one time or another, Dad got into painting. He tried his hand at bookbinding. He really got deep into leatherworking. He'd make everything from keychains to belts to saddles to holsters, purses, wallets, book covers. In fact, Here are just some of his leather tools that I'm trying to learn how to use. For the longest time, he got into CB radios. He not only used them and upgraded them, but he would shop for broken ones and spend time repairing them. I bet there are still dozens up in his attic. These are 40-year-old snaps. I don't expect them to last very long. He made furniture, he did upholstery, he sewed, he rebuilt and worked on cars. And all the while he did woodworking, including quite a lot of work on the lathe. Of all these memories, I remember this the most. These simple leather wristbands. He would make these for my brothers and I, back in the 70s. He'd make them for our friends, and we could go to school and we could sell them for $2 or $3 each. And I remember coming home with lists of 5 or 6 names, and Dad would make them, and then we could keep the money. He also made them for Cub Scout groups, for church groups. When we lost him a couple of years ago, several people on Facebook commented that they still had, or wished they had, my dad's leather wristbands. He touched a lot of people with his making. There was no internet. There was only books and magazines. And for each and every hobby, the bathroom would fill up with new subscriptions. You'd be surprised how often in a house with only one full bathroom, a kid will read his parents' magazines. It wasn't just the crafts though. Even though we grew up quite poor, we were the first family I knew of to get a home computer. And with the computers came a whole new level of magazines. Dad was never hesitant on technology. He embraced it for everything it was worth and taught us to do the same. I didn't know it at the time, but those early days on the computer would change my life. The more I look back, the more I realize that watching my dad's creativity and the way he encouraged us to explore technology had a profound impact on me. I joined the Army when I was 18 and was quickly stationed overseas. My dad, having been in the Navy, knew how important mail call was to a lonely kid far from home and would type short letters almost every day and mail them to me, just to make sure I'd get a letter. At this point in my life, we were not on the best of terms. I was a stubborn, know-it-all kid, but even so, he'd write. In the Army, I was lucky enough to be pulled aside because of my tests and told to learn computers. And in many of those letters, my dad would repeatedly urge me to learn all I could about them. He was convinced they would change the world. And frequently he would ask me to go downtown and buy some piece of pirated software for him. My dad treated computers like any other one of his hobbies. He dove in head first. He learned everything he could about graphics programs, he started to hoard clip art, and he started to use the computer to make all sorts of crafts and art. After the Army, I was off and running in my career in computers, networks, and network security. Eventually, I was able to found 2 successful security companies. And perspective's a funny thing. For the longest time, I thought this was due to my own hard work and study. While I hope that had something to do with it, it wasn't until we lost my dad that I began to realize how well he had set me up. My oldest brother is one of the best CAD trainers and engineers for one of Autodesk's leading resellers. And my middle brother still works in the computer security field. He set us all up to some degree. I got into making from the digital side of things. I got into 3D printing early, and some CAD design is one of my hobbies. I had a CNC long before I had a bandsaw. It took me forever to buy a table saw, mostly because they scared the shit out of me. And truthfully, they still do. And like many of us, for years I would make projects for myself and often share my progress on Facebook for family and friends. No matter what I made, Dad would always be one of the first to comment. I'm sure he was proud of me for other accomplishments in my life, and we would certainly talk about business and other topics, but he'd always comment on the things I was making. Today, when I share my projects, I often find myself missing my dad in the comments section. By this time, Dad had lost a lot of his vision and was kind of frail. He still made things. He would sit for hours and tie paracord into elaborate shapes for keychains. And he would occasionally putter in the garage and make small boxes. He would make what he could, and he was making things right up until he went in the hospital that final time. His comments were never, and I mean never, dismissive of new technologies. If anything, he would give me ideas or lament how cool that could have been if it were available back in the day. Nice 3D printer. Can it make drywall anchors? How strong is that plastic? I bet you could make leather stamps with it. I bet that CNC could make a huge leather press pattern. He was always helpful. He was always fascinated. My dad was a maker,